Before the podcast gets started, I wanted to tell you about my friends at Ned. They make the best CBD full spectrum hemp oil. It's actually magic. If you understand anything about imagination, if you're here for imagination, understand that people imbue and embed their consciousness and their intentions into everything they put out in the world. So when you meet a group of people who genuinely understand that and are also serving up products that are proven to work with your endogenous endocannabinoid system, easy for me to say, what are you going to do? You're going to go get that stuff. So go to helloned.com, use the code SYNC, SYNC at checkout, and see what happens. Imagine what will happen. I take it. It's the only CBD oil I've ever taken, will ever take. These dudes are awesome. Go check out the episode with them if you want to get a sense of what I'm talking about. But go do that. helloned.com, use the code SYNC at checkout, get 15% off your order. All right, see you on the other side.
This is Synchronicity.
Welcome to Synchronicity, another solo cast this week. It's a really good one, though. I think this is, I know it's going to be one of the best, because this is, if we're looking at active principles related to imagination, prayer. What is prayer? That's a big one. And, I've been thinking about prayer a lot lately, just because the definition that I use and subscribe to is that prayer is just imagination plus faith. But we'll break down exactly what that means, because those are nebulous terms to a lot of people. But I've been personally thinking about it because when you know how to pray, that's a different type of thing. And another reason I've been thinking about prayer is, let's not get too off into space. It's important to bear witness to what's going on this level, in this reality. And I'm recording this on Monday, August 5th. And the prior 2 days, there have been 2 mass shootings in the United States. So let's bear witness to that fact. See that as a symptom of imaginations and unconscious and people just gone wild. They don't know who they are. They don't know the power that they have. They don't know the tools and skills that are readily available to them to draw out the best versions of themselves, so we can take care of people who are likely or prone to do this and identify them and create support systems. It's totally possible, by the way. It sounds crazy, but we can do that. Like, there's resources all over the place to do that. So we're going to figure that out. Anyway, what I'm saying is, when mass shootings happen, politicians will typically be like, thoughts and prayers. And we can see through the thin veneer of their kind of callousness that really, it shows that they don't really care, that it's just something they're saying. They're not really praying because they don't know how to pray. Most people don't know how to pray. It's hard. It's not hard. It's just we didn't know certain things. So we're going to be talking about prayer. We may get into a little of what Neville Goddard referred to as the promise. And that's a little trippy. And if you want to know anything about the promise, it's, using your imagination to select realities where you have stuff, relationships, all the things you've ever wanted. That's using something called the law, right? That's what Neville Goddard referred to as law. It's the active principle of using your imagination through a variety of techniques to summon forth the best reality. What ends up happening is if you keep doing that and you really get it, you start selecting the best version of yourself. And the best version of yourself is probably not what you think of yourself right now, unless you're like totally there, which is like, you don't have doubts, you don't have fears, you don't have anxieties. You finally are being the person you've always wanted to be. You're fulfilled, you're happy, you have faith, you have all these things. You're in ecstasy at times. Everything is funny. You're dealing with difficult situations with grace, all of those things. So you're appropriating higher states of consciousness. What that eventually leads to is what Neville Goddard referred to as the promise, which is this idea that you're going to wake up in your own mind as God. You'll also be you, but you're God. And he calls it Jesus Christ. And it's this resurrection of your own consciousness in your own mind. And this sounds totally nuts for a lot of reasons, but when it happens, you kind of can't deny it. And it's a pretty cool thing. And the reason it's the promise is this will happen to everyone. This is literally what we're doing here. So that's, as he spoke more about this during his career, Neville Goddard, at least, I think the times are changing now, but the crowds got smaller and smaller, and like the event people would be like, you know, maybe you could not talk about this weirdo shit. And can you just talk about people getting houses and cars and wives and husbands? And he's like, nah, like I had mystical experiences. Like if I have to say this to the wall, that's what I'm going to do. So that was him. But anyway, we're going to talk about prayer today. I don't know how much of the promise we're going to get into. We'll certainly do many episodes on that. But we are talking about the art of prayer. So what is praying, right? What is this idea that we ask for something and then it happens? What does that mean? So again, endless hat tips, hugs, love to Neville Goddard for clearly writing and speaking about this stuff and allowing people who are curious to kind of process it in their own way. But he defines it, prayer, as imagination plus faith, right? The only faculties of mind needed to create objective conditions. So let's talk about imagination, right? And there are many ways to break this down from kind of a mystical standpoint, but let's just talk about it in a practical way. Your imagination are those techniques that I gave in Imaginal Techniques 1, and however many episodes there were, 4 or 5 after that, where we essentially build this scene imaginally, a very short and compact scene from our own point of view that implies what we desire or wish for has been realized. It's a scene following that. We load it with sensory vividness. We load it with a positive emotion like love or awe, wonder, and that's all we do. We just keep snapping back to that thing, and then eventually something happens in our reality. It seems like, for me, your consciousness changes and then the thing actually happens. And one of those things that we're doing there, that's the imagination, is building faith. If you keep walking into that, that naturally builds this quality. Let's break down faith a little bit more. What is faith? Again, Goddard would refer to it as loyalty to the unseen world, which is a really cool way of saying it. I like that. But I also like to think of it as, if we don't have any visual, audio, any proof in this world, if we wish for $1 billion, right? Why you would want $1 billion? Maybe you do. And we open our eyes, it's not right in front of our face immediately. But if we have faith that because we imagine it, because we know for sure that what we imagine literally precedes materiality, how do we stay aware of the fact that that's true and what we're seeing with our senses isn't? Well, that's called cultivating faith. And it's a bit like suspended disbelief at first, because you have to be open-minded enough to be like, all right, everything I've thought about the world and this world is 100% not true. And that's kind of freaking me out. And you got to go deal with all this stuff. But if it is true that imagination precedes materiality, you then have opened up a portal to the best version of you and your life. And you need to be, this is all going to be aligned with where you are in terms of believing this. Like I said, what this eventually leads to is the best version of yourself. That's why it's the coolest thing ever. All the other stuff is great. Don't let anyone tell you that if you want a nice house, you want to be in a community of people who are wonderful, you can't do that. That's great. But the best version of yourself, where you're not freaked out, you're not stressed out. Oh man, that's good. But let's go back to this idea of how do we pray, right? So let's say, and like prayer can involve a lot of different things. Going back to the shootings, right? What if you really were to pray for those families and, help avoid situations, pray that these types of things don't happen? Is it just magically not going to happen? Probably not. There are complex scenarios involving God knows amount of metaphysical and karmic things to make it happen. However, maybe by your act of prayer, you do figure out a way to make a positive impact overall. And if everyone starts doing that, it really starts having impact, But let's talk about a specific way. Let's say you really saw someone who was going through a tough time, because I think this is one of the best ways to understand prayer for someone else, because many of you will use it for yourself. I mean, I just gave you the technique. It's all over the place. So there's the imaginal act, and the faith is just believing that it happened. You'll know it. You won't be thinking of it. You'll be living from it. And it is a very noticeable different state of consciousness between those two. And you'll get it if you're really doing this every day, every night. And I'll point out, like with the imaginal stuff, if you really want something, you'll do this shit a lot during the day. You will find times to do it. My recorder cut off, so we'll pick it up right here. No harm, no foul. Let's continue on with how do we pray for other people, right? We kind of get that imagination is the idea that generates the cause or what's going to happen in the world, but faith is what forms it. It's the thing that molds it into the actual thing it's going to be in this world, and that's what faith's part of this is. So again, let's say we're trying to pray for someone. How do you do that? Is it enough just to say thoughts and prayers? Probably not. You have to change your entire conception of the person, and the way we do that is actually with telepathy. Oh my gosh, it's getting weirder. But this is what you do. Let's say you have a friend who's going through a hard time. You, in your mind's eye, in your imagination, yell their name. Say it, yell it. Hey! And you want to hear them respond in your mind, in your imagination, in their voice. And they're going to say, what's up? And you're going to respond back to them. And then you're going to have them say to you that they've never felt better, or whatever you're trying to pray for them to have or be, wherever you want them to be. And use this lovingly, please. You'll understand why if you do it and you don't do it. Just use it lovingly. Pray for them. You basically say, they will say, I've never felt better. I've always wanted to feel like this. And you say, wow, that's great. And this works. This genuinely works. Now, there is something called the law of reversibility, which basically says that if the person can't imagine or can't truly feel what you want for them for another person. So if you're person A and you're wishing for something person B, if person B can't imagine it for a person C, it will bounce back and hit you. So if it's a loving thing, it's good because it bounces back and hits you. But if this person just their subjective mind, their unconscious, their real self cannot process this right now, it's not going to necessarily work. Now, there are ways to kind of skirt that, and we'll get into that into maybe some advanced imaginal stuff. But I wouldn't play around with that stuff until you fully understand that your imagination literally creates reality. So if you use that method of prayer for an individual, a great thing to use this for is like the families who have just endured this tragedy with so many of them, the families of the victims and just everyone surrounded. You might not know their voices, but you can if you see a picture of them or you see them on TV, you can do this. But I would start with yourself and then expand to people you know and love. It's much easier to do, and it's also much more effective because you have, sensory cues that you can embed into these scenes. So that's it. I mean, the final thing I'll say about all of this is the world is a symphony of synchronicities, and you're the conductor. And what you're trying to conduct is the realization that this is your show. It's everyone else's show too, but it's your show. And when you wake up to that and realize you can exercise a high degree of control over your life in a loving, wonderful way, your entire world begins to change. You change and everything around you begins to change. And that's what we're all here for. I'm very confident in that fact, whether we recognize it or not. So that's the point of prayer. That's how you pray. Remember, imagination plus faith. Imagination forms and creates this thing into the world. It births it, and the faith solidifies it and molds it. And faith is just loyalty to the things your senses don't pick up. It's hard sometimes, right? It's so easy to get caught up in this world, but try it out. Try this stuff empirically. And finally, I'll say this every time I remember, but I should say it every time. Don't take my word for it. Don't take my word on any of this stuff ever. Try it yourself. See if it works. Prove it to yourself. It's very important to do that, because otherwise you're taking someone else's word for it. And I'm gonna love myself. I'm cool as shit, but still, don't take my word for it. It's not worth it. So that's the art of prayer. This is episode 1. If you have any questions, noah@syncpodcast.com. I'll do my best to get back to you. Rate and review this podcast if it's helped you. Really helps me, gets it up there. The reviews are coming in droves now. I fucking love it. So cool. A dream come true. That's it. I'm probably going to try to do a couple of these solo casts a week and then get a guest in every week. But again, I've made a commitment to only do high quality interviews. So that's much less Skype interviews unless I can be assured the sound quality is of a certain level. So that's it. And I will see you next week.